Hey, and welcome to Matt and Jess TV. I am Matt Roast here with Jessica Bunbun, and this is our new Only Murders in the Building theory discussion. And I think this one is a topic that has been out there in Only fandoms in the building for a pretty long time, and that is the idea of, is there a person who's actually been behind everything, whether you want to call them a big bad, a Moriarty, somebody who has just been sort of the puppet master, pulling all these strings through all the different seasons.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know who Moriarty is, that is the foil for Sherlock Holmes. He's always behind everything. So that's been sort of the idea that we've been, talking about for this video. If there's somebody that is behind all these deaths of
Yeah.
Tim Kono, Bunny, Ben, Saz, and maybe Charles, who is behind the scenes, pulling the strings, whispering in people's ears, and making all of these murders happen?
Now, if you guys are wondering, okay, is there actually going to be one? Like, is that a thing? We've got some evidence that we've dug up that strongly suggests that will be the case. Well, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some of the loose ends, the unexplained mysteries that have been around through the show. And then, of course, we'll get into some of the big suspects, like who are the Moriarty people that have been discussed kind of the most across social media over these past few years. Before we do, though, be sure to hit that subscribe button because we are a one-stop shop for all things Only Murders in the Building. Every Tuesday, we not only have reviews for each episode, but also previews for what's coming up. And here on Wednesdays, we have new theories that we go into, piece things together, and they are so much fun.
Also, you can follow us over on Patreon for just $5 a month. You can vote in polls that help decide what we cover here at the channel, as well as what we cover exclusively on Patreon. And right now, we are covering exclusively over there The Penguin. We have weekly reviews going on over there. So thank you so much to everyone who has joined. It really helps Matt and I here at the channel to be able to continue to bring you these videos. And before we get into this further, just remember that all theories are welcome here. So if you have somebody that you think is the Moriarty or the big bad that's been pulling the strings for all 4 seasons, leave it in the comments for us.
Yeah, we love reading and discussing these things with you guys, and especially for this first topic, because I think a lot of us in the fandom are going to have different perceptions as to what is a loose end versus what is not a loose end, what has been resolved. But over the past few seasons, there have been things that are introduced on the show that have not been fully explained. And, we've sort of gone back and looked at some things. Like, these are a part of what stands out to us. So let's start by going all the way back here to season 1. All right, here we are, season 1.
Boop, bop, bop, boop, boop.
Who poisoned Winnie the dog? This has been out there for a long time. Then you also have a note that Jan had on her door saying, "I'm watching you." Once again, no real answers on that.
No, I've just always assumed that Jan wrote that herself, but no answers on it.
Yeah, it's very well possible that Jan did, and that's what makes a lot of these interesting.
Yeah.
But it's also interesting that at the end of season 1, Mabel did sort of acknowledge that there were loose ends, and so there was some sort of like canonical explanation of, oh, do we really have everything figured out here? I don't think we do.
No.
Now, season 2, here we are. How did Poppy get so much intel on the building? Like, maybe this one is a little bit, I don't know, flimsy to some people. You could just be like, okay, well, Poppy did the research. Other people were able to figure out the inner workings of it. But to me, I've always had a little bit of a problem with the end of season 2. Everything was just sort of tossed together kind of messily, and then we just moved on.
And then there's also the text that was received to Charles where he was like, "Who is this? Not your friend," at the beginning of this season.
Yeah.
They haven't mentioned it since. It's just gone. It was such a huge clue and a big thing that was like, oh, I might be talking to the murderer, and they have never mentioned it since.
No, they've never really mentioned that since. I mean, it's possible that they're never even going to mention how Bev Mellon knew about Saz's trampoline park. Like, that's something we brought up in the review for and that may end up being a loose end.
Mhm.
Yeah, we tried to go back into season 3, and it feels like, and this is why you guys can let us know in the comments if there's anything from season 3 you feel like is a loose end. I struggled more to pull some of those out, and it leads me to an idea that I'll get to a little bit later. But before we do, here are some comments that do quote unquote confirm that a Moriarty theory is existing within this world.
Yeah.
So this was a Reddit AMA that John Hoffman did after season 2. And for those of you who don't know, John Hoffman is the showrunner. He
Mhm.
is designing the story. He
Mhm.
said then, the poisoning of Winnie and the letter on Jan's door remain a part of the many mysteries in the Arconia, thinking a little bit like a Moriarty situation, if that helps. He said Moriarty himself. This
Yeah.
is real.
Yeah, he did. So, I mean, if he's saying that, then it really does give more flame to this than just smoke that this might be a thing that's happening.
Yeah, like we have to take this seriously. I mean, he also said to TV Line when asked about the dog, we like our loose ends. I don't mind carrying loose ends from season 1 to season 2, from season 2 to season 3. There is a
Mhm.
long game plan involving some of these clues.
Yeah.
Now, okay, here's an idea. I don't know how I feel about this. Is it possible that they originally were going to plan something like this, but then in the midst of season 3, once they got Meryl Streep on board, once they started doing the musical, have they kind of abandoned this idea since? It just feels like there's not as many loose ends these days.
No, but it does feel more and more like everything is being tied in. In our review, we spoke a lot about how there's a lot more tie-ins to season 3 into season 4
Mhm.
than we originally thought. I mean, even just as simple as them mentioning the word dazzle over and over again,
Yeah.
like nobody uses that word
No.
in regular day life, and Charles is using it and the writer's using it, and we had this reenactment with Charles where he's pulling out the hanky and cleaning up the blood. Like there's a lot of tie-ins, especially with Saz and the ham radio and her mentioning this to Charles mid season 3. And
Yeah.
every season it feels like Charles is in some sort of danger and that
Yeah.
maybe he's the ultimate target for all of this. So let's get into who are like the main 3
Mhm.
people that we've been talking about together, before doing this video, as well as what we've seen online from people. And that is that the big Moriarty behind all of this is either Jan, Howard, or Mabel, which I have always found to be the most interesting of what her motivation would be to do this.
Yeah.
But let's start with Jan. So, definite sane person Jan is my agent of chaos. She
Yep.
did kill him. Oh no. She
Yes.
did try to kill Charles. She was involved with Charles, and she has, even though she wasn't able to kill him, she has killed or tried to kill a lot of her lovers and the people that she was with. She was also with Saz, who is now dead. And I
Yeah.
know that she's denied that she had any part of that, but it's Jan, and Jan is a killer and she lies, right? So the fact that she has been linked to killing her lovers or trying to kill her lovers, I mean, there's a few people on this list. Bunny, I mean, nobody liked Bunny, let's be honest.
No.
Everyone who lived in the building had some sort of beef with Bunny. So, could this be something that then she's whispering in, somebody's ear to be like, hey, you know what? You could really get A, B, and C if you just killed Bunny, kind of thing, and that might be part of it. And it could be the same with Ben. There's no obvious connection with Jan and Ben, but somebody tried to kill Charles in season 3 as well. So I mean, it connects her to a lot of it. And killers often insert themselves into the investigations, and all 3 of these people do that. I mean, Jan tried to do that in the first season. She has now said in this season, by the way, I'm listening to your podcast, so I'm learning about all the secret tunnels. Thanks for that tip, kind of thing. So she's been in every season in one shape or another. So do they just love Amy Ryan as much as we do, or are they building to something else?
I think the most Moriarty-like quality that Jan has is that, and you just kind of alluded to it, is that she has sort of this aura about her where
Mhm.
even if you're not seeing her, you know that she's there. You
Yeah.
know that she sort of has like these tentacles that are extending out to other characters. You know, her relationship with Saz
Yeah.
was pretty well documented at this point. And also, we know that the world of Only Murders in the Building is somewhat of a fantastical reality in a
Mhm.
way. This is a world where a movie can get together without needing life rights until the very
I
last
know.
minute.
My
Like,
goodness.
we're willing to kind of take a certain amount of unbelievability here. Like, is it possible that Jan can, assemble some things behind bars in prison? And I think the clear answer to that is yeah. It's why I sort of thought about, to some extent, could Teddy Demas be somehow responsible with all of this? But he feels like a little bit of a lesser sort of Moriarty figure just because he's not around anywhere near as much as these other characters. But I think Jan is more than capable of something like this. She's very dangerous. She has some sort of a grudge. Like, the biggest question I had personally with Jan is that to me, she sort of has a little bit of like a Dexter Morgan sort of code as to what she thinks are the right and wrong ways to take people out. If she's sort of pulling strings, is she going to disapprove of some of these other methods that are being taken?
Yeah, the thing about season 3 and her being this sort of Moriarty behind the scenes, if she's whispering in people's ears, I mean, we've both said that we feel that what happened with Cliff and Ben ended up being more like, let's have some only accidents in the building. You know, they're
Yes.
they're having a fight. This wasn't premeditated. This is they're in the middle of a fight. They're tussling around. He fell down the elevator. It's like,
Yeah.
okay. But because somebody attempted to get Charles, that's the key to me more than anything. It's not necessarily attached to the death of Ben because that was more of an accident. Even Donna with, the rat poison was more of an accident. She's like, oh, I was just trying to make him sick. I wasn't trying to actually kill him or anything like that. So to me, it's more of what happened to Charles and how was he able to avoid that?
I think the biggest bit of evidence with Jan in particular is just that the show wants us to think about Jan. I think it's not a coincidence that they've sort of let her now linger out there. She hasn't gone back to prison. She's
No.
more than capable of it. They do love Amy Ryan, so I don't think we can.
Who doesn't?
I know, right? Like,
She's great.
we can't rule out her as possibly being the big bad at this point.
Okay, let's talk about Howard.
Oh boy.
He's a merc out there trying to kill everybody. I'm just kidding. I actually think he's a sweetheart. I love him. I want him to reach into my head and scratch my brain. He is like the
Oh.
most adorable, wholesome treasure on this show. And I know that there's a lot of people out
Yeah.
there that think that he's behind everything. And I understand why. Like, as much as I love him and feel like he's just adorable, Howard, and he's just awkward, I understand why people think that he might be the killer. For me, I just feel like he truly loves this building and he truly loves the people in the building and he loves being part of the community of the building. So if people were dying in the building, that's not something that he's really going to want to have happen unless he thinks the building is under some sort of threat. So for him, is he going to kill Tim Kono or whisper in Jan's ear? I don't know. I mean, Jan did try to like throw Howard under the bus that first season.
Yes.
So was Howard whispering in her ear? I don't think so, but maybe. But I mean, him and Bunny definitely had beef over the years. He was supposed to be part of the play, but then, got demoted to being this assistant, even though we later saw how talented he is. He's always sort of being swept under. But what's his connection to Saz? If Saz wasn't the target, which I would think she's probably not if it's Howard,
Hmm.
then it's Charles. And one of the big motivations that I had been wondering is Howard wants to be part of the building. He wants to be part of the tenants,
Yeah.
and he definitely wants to be part of the investigations because he has tried to insert himself again, as killers do, every single season. And he has been trying to be part of the podcast almost every season. And even this season, he's trying to get his own podcast going with Mabel. So if he was after Charles this whole time, it opens up a spot for him on the podcast.
I think he's a very interesting candidate. I am like you though. I like Howard the way that he is. I don't even necessarily think in general the show has to have a Moriarty figure. I really enjoy the season by season approach. If they do something like that and they can tie it together, make it make sense,
Mhm.
I'll be okay with it. But Howard does feel like the name that gets thrown out there the most. And
The most.
like you, I understand why. I mean,
Yeah.
even just structurally, other than, our trio, Michael Cyril Creighton, he is the only other established series regular that is on this show. You see him notably within the theme song, and they've said time and time again, these appearances and the theme songs, they do matter a lot.
Yeah, he's almost always the first person walking the dog, pig, bird,
Yeah.
whatever, and then the last person also.
Yeah, like he has a very distinct purpose there. And it's also kind of a classic sort of murder mystery trope that there is this character who is unappreciated, ignored, feels like they are less than,
Yeah.
and then they have this secret fire burning within them that is sort of, I'm going to prove these people wrong. I'm so much more than they think that I am. I'm going to show them, and it becomes sort of this obsession. Like there may have been something that happened in season 1 that just ignited this spark for Howard behind the scenes, and it's kind of motivated him to be this whisperer of secrets, or this person who has evolved into the central big bad figure.
If he is the person, it would make sense because, like I said, he really loves the building. He is
Yes.
involved in everybody's business. He is the nosy bee, just like me. So he does know everybody's secrets, and he would be very protective of the building. There's also a couple other sort of just tidbits. He's got this cadaver dog this season, Gravy. So, could he be leading them sort of off the track as much as he can with this? Or, he also said that he fainted. Like, he was like, listen, I fainted once at the sight of blood, but all other times, plural, was acting. But it was really weird for him to use the word times like as a plural,
Yeah.
because I only counted him fainting twice. So if he fainted once on purpose and once as a lie, then maybe he's lying about his problem with the sight of blood. And that's, I feel like it was very purposeful that he said twice and he let something slip. You know what I mean? And the other thing is just about Howard and with Jan. Jan believing him to be the mastermind behind everything. Killers can smell their own. And if he's had some sort of hand in this or manipulation and pushing her into killing Tim, or, at the beginning of all of this, that maybe they were friends, or maybe he was like, yeah, none of us liked him. You go get that. That could be a thing where she's just like, yeah, he's really manipulative.
It's pretty funny that neither one of us necessarily want Howard to be this Moriarty figure,
No.
but we both have so much evidence, because it's like,
There's a lot.
even for me still, there's, Michael has said in interviews that he intentionally plays Howard as a little bit suspicious, and that may be a directive from the writers, or it may just be his sort of larger awareness. And then also beyond just that,
Might also be the writing, there's all these weird things that are happening with him.
yes,
Because like he also has said that he's a librarian, but like he's an assistant, he's on the play, he's doing, now he's working for the movie. It's like, what? You're a librarian and you live in the Arconia? Like,
Yes.
what is going on with all these jobs?
that's one of the biggest things I wonder about. That it's very expensive to live in Manhattan, and maybe this is sort of a similar approach to, I don't know, Friends or any of these other New York sitcoms, where we're constantly like, how do these people afford these places? And maybe that's just the way it is with Howard. But it's just like, for a guy who supposedly has a job, he has a lot of time on his hands, and I don't know how he has any money to do whatever it is he's doing.
Okay, let's talk about Mabel,
Yeah.
Bloody Mabel, who has had this label on her since Finding Bunny in season 2. I really don't think that Mabel is the person that's behind this. I've been really trying to reach in and figure out, like, what would her motivation be for all of this? Like, she definitely had a relationship with Tim. she didn't really have that much of a relationship with Bunny. I mean, everybody had some kind of relationship with Bunny. Like, we saw everything that unfolded with Bunny, even coming to the door and wearing the hoodie and all that. But to kill her, I don't know. She didn't really have any connection to the play
Yeah.
in season 3, but that's the only motivation that I could see her kind of being, was doing the whispering, like, we need
Mhm.
to get Ben out of here, because if we get Ben out of here, my broken podcast comes back together and my olds are back and we're actually able to make a podcast, because that was definitely absent in season 3 a lot more than it has been, where they just weren't really working together until the very end, and she was getting extremely frustrated with it. But now with Saz, is it just that Saz is getting too close? She figured something out? Like, I don't know what Mabel's motivation would be to kill Charles. Like, I just don't know.
I just have a very hard time buying it for a lot of different reasons. Just starting with the idea that having one of the trio basically turn on the other two, it's really heartbreaking. Like, it would be heartbreaking if Howard ends up being a big bad because we've all kind of come to know and love him, but he's not one
I'll
of.
still love him. I don't
Okay,
care. Listen, I still love Jan, and I know what she's done.
I will be very sad if Howard is a killer to me
I will
personally.
be.
I would be devastated if it's Mabel, just because it would kind of feel like just this big, shocking betrayal of what this show has been all of this time. And I don't need this show to stomp on our hearts. And I think Selena has said that she's pitched Mabel being a killer or pitched playing a killer at some point. And it's like that's all well and good, but I like Selena playing Mabel the way in which that we see her. Like the other evidence that's just out there for her. I mean, it's just a couple of little things. One of them I think is just silly that her last name is Mora. Is that short for Moriarty? It feels like you're kind of just like stretching the Laffy Taffy a little bit there.
Yeah, but the show does do that.
It does do that. I think the other thing is just sort of this idea that Mabel has been presented as, okay, she doesn't really have any money. She doesn't really have any place to sort of call her home. Is all of this sort of a little bit of a get up, because we've had many mentions of her aunt and we've never
Mhm.
actually met her aunt on screen on the show before. Is her aunt secretly supplying her with all of this money and resources that nobody else really is aware of? And it's just like with Mabel in particular, we are really having to get into kind of writing our own stories for her to explain why she would do this, because it's just like, on the surface, for example, the podcast is really successful because it's all three of them.
Mhm.
If she actually intended to kill Charles, she's kind of undermining her own podcast in that way.
She absolutely is. I mean, there is this season where Bev is trying to get her to pitch a story to her. It kind of
Yeah.
felt like it was out of place. I didn't really know why this was happening. There wasn't enough humor there for me to think that it was just a ha-ha.
Yeah.
I was kind of like, okay, well, if Mabel is the person behind it all, maybe this was kind of brought up for her to be able to actually come together and pitch something, because this season she's found her footing. She's
Mhm.
a podcast producer, and she's going to find a way to make that happen for herself. So I don't know, if one of the trio ends up dead, then she's got something to pitch. It could be something like that, but we already saw that with Poppy. Like,
Yeah.
it's gotta be something a bit deeper than that. So I'm having a hard time believing that it's her. But if you guys think that's her and you have more, ideas of why,
Yeah.
please let us know in the comments, because I want to be able to buy into the theory if it ends up coming together.
Well, yeah, I think that's what makes this video so fun, is that we all have big theories as to what somebody could be doing behind the scenes and what somebody could not be. Like for me with
Mhm.
Mabel, I just want to picture Mabel as this person who's just, in her late 20s, early 30s, who's just finding herself lost in life and adrift.
As
And
many of us do.
yeah, it's a very relatable story, and it's not something that a lot of shows are altogether eager to explore. And
Mhm.
so I like Mabel the way that she is. I don't want to disrupt the trio. Like I said earlier, I'm okay if there is no big bad Moriarty and the show pivoted away from that at some point. They aren't doing that anymore. But if they are, you guys gotta pay this off.
Okay, so there are a couple other names that have been floated out there, but if these people end up being the big bad of the whole show, I'm going to be kind of irritated by it
Okay, let's hear it.
because one of them is Mabel's aunt, who we've never seen
Yeah.
and don't know anything about. So she just pops up in the final reel being like, "I did it all." I'm going to be like, "Bruh."
That would be
No,
so terrible. I would be
please.
so mad.
Another person is Lester, and the biggest sort of feel around that is kind of what I said about Howard. He's been with the building a long time.
Yeah.
He knows the building very well. He cares about the people that are in the building and would want to see sort of the right people in the building and what's going on. But then that doesn't explain people like Ben.
Yeah.
It just doesn't sort of fit into that unless he's really having a problem with Charles. And again, it's sort of the same idea as with Jan, that it wasn't about Ben, it was about Charles. And then I've seen some people also floating the gut milk lady, who I honestly just think is there for the ha-has.
Yeah.
And I've also seen people floating out Uma, and that she is somebody who also really does care about the building. She may not come across that she does,
Yeah.
but she really does. And she does care about who is in the building and, who are her neighbors, and that this building continues to be as important as it is.
I just hope we see the gut milk lady again. Like, where has she been?
I
She's been off the
know.
show for a long time. Yeah, I would not be thrilled if it's any of these people, just because I like them as they are. They kind of make up the colorful landscape of the building.
It also just needs to be someone, I think, that we can all figure out, that makes some kind of sense. That's
Yeah.
the beauty of this show, and why we do get to come here every week
Yeah.
with 3 videos talking about different theories and what's coming up and what we think and what could be happening. But if it's somebody like Mabel's aunt that we haven't
I
even
know.
seen, then all of us Only Murders sleuths out here could never figure that out.
Yeah.
There's not any evidence of it. Nobody even knows what this person looks like.
I like to think that they have a plan, and if they do have a plan, they're dropping little hints here or there. I think they're probably just being careful as to how many they drop at any given point, because insofar as we know, there is no exact plan as to how long this show is going to go. We already know it's renewed for a season 5. I hope we get a season 6, but kind of after season 6 is where shows get really, really expensive. So I'm trying to sort of be realistic in my head here and thinking like, okay, season 6, season 7, maybe one of those will be the last. If it's season 5, I'm going to be really upset.
Yeah, for me, I feel like it's probably not, because when they announced it, they didn't announce that it was a final
Yeah.
season with a show that's got this much Emmy love around it and such a huge cast and big stars, and it's attracting big stars. I just think that they would have been like, this is it.
Yeah. So that's what we got though right now for this Moriarty big bad discussion. This was so much fun. This is one of my favorite things to talk about when it comes to this show. So be sure to hit that subscribe button so you do not miss our 3 Only Murders in the Building discussions a week. And if you want to support us more, join our Patreon. We have a link in the description below. For just $5 a month, you can vote on polls to help determine what we are going to cover next on Patreon. And thank you so much
Thank
to
you.
our supporters there. And we'll see you guys here next time.